Good afternoon. My name is Vivek Choudhury. I'm Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives at the George Washington School of Business. Welcome to the third session of George Talks Business. This is an exciting new initiative we've launched at GWSB, where we bring you on a weekly basis interesting speakers on a wide variety of subjects. Before we welcome today's guest, though, I want to first say thank you to Launchpad, which is one of our great new student organizations, for their help with today's session. Now, I am delighted to welcome today our guest, Dan Simons, founder and co-owner of Farmers Restaurant Group, and we are very proud to say a GWSB alum. Dan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to go ahead and dive right into the questions. So as you can see, we have an audience full of students. And it is my guess that many of these students are aspiring entrepreneurs. But what they're probably wondering is, how do I get from here to there? How do I get from the classroom that I'm in now to where you are, a very successful business leader, entrepreneur? So to that end, can you share a little bit about your career journey from when you graduated from GWSB? For instance, how did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
I don't know if I chose entrepreneurship or if it chose me. I knew that I had a vision for wanting to work for myself one day, but I was pretty clear, I think, when I was an undergrad, and that's when I started working in bars and restaurants, that I knew I had a lot to learn. And so I started writing business plans when I was in college. And I loved my time at GW because it was so dynamic and being in the city, and even though DC wasn't then what it is today, I got exposed to bars and restaurants, but I knew I needed to learn. So my journey of entrepreneurship was really about wanting to get experience and get hands-on and learn from other people. And so that's what I spent the first 10 years of my career doing. I don't know if I ever thought I was quite ready to do my own thing. I was always a little nervous to jump off the log. You know, it's a lot easier to criticize your boss and have opinions about the way other people do things than it is to actually jump off the log and go for it. So I didn't start my own business until I was 31. And I think that's part of what set me up for success was I took a decade to learn and get ready and ideally practice the resilience and the grit that it takes, because entrepreneurship is like a giant ongoing kick in the teeth. Sounds charming, doesn't it? Does it just make you all want to jump up and get some of that? But it looks, and look, I appreciate that you described me as successful. I don't know if I would use that word. I think it's, I'm in progress. I think that that's what being an entrepreneur is for all of us, for all of you. You're in progress, and you got to grow, and you got to learn, and you got to take the hard blows because they are definitely coming, and you got to like it, and I like it.
So you said there were a lot of experiences you had in the first 10 years. Maybe you could share a couple of those experiences that were sort of really informative in your decision?
Well, I worked for a couple of great companies, probably the best of which before I started my own business was the Cheesecake Factory. And it was a tiny little company when I started, 5 or 6 restaurants. And so it's not what you think of it today. And before Cheesecake, I worked for TGI Fridays, also not what you think of today back then. So I saw these companies when they were small and growing. And I learned about systems and control and professionalism. I also learned that my industry was full of a lot of unprofessionalism. And I saw things in my first 10 years, drugs, alcohol, inappropriate behavior, the way immigrant employees were treated or the way women or minorities were treated. And while I loved the industry, I just thought gotta be a better way to do this. And so, I was raised by my parents to never stay silent. So I always had a big voice and wanted to stand up for the employees. And that's one of the things that really inspired me to say, this can be done better, it can be done more fairly, it can be done more fun. And I think through some great jobs and learning about systems, I reached a point where I said, whatever I don't know, I don't care what I don't know anymore, I'm ready to go for it.
So you mentioned a couple of restaurant chains that have been, of course, very, very successful, the Cheesecake Factory and TGIF. But the popular wisdom is that the restaurant industry has one of the highest failure rates. And I've been reading some research recently that maybe this is true or not true, but that's what is generally believed, that the majority of new restaurants fail within the first 1 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. As you considered being an entrepreneur, given that, how did you decide to choose this industry? I know you had some experience in it, but did that give you some pause?
I think I was a sophomore at GW when I started tending bar, and it was like the best thing ever. Like the party, it was fun every night. And what I realized is everybody else was partying and I was partying, but then they would get some version of hammered or wasted, whatever kids call it today, but that's what we called it back then. But at the end of the night, I had money in my pocket and I still had both feet on the ground, and then the party could continue late night. But I loved the business. I loved kind of throwing the party, being part of the party. So I've never worked in another industry. I got a taste for hospitality, the team building, the fun, the kind of putting on an event, the being at the party but not getting lost in the party. And I just found that I really enjoyed that. So I'll be 50 next year, and this is the only industry that I know and that I've ever worked in.
Okay. Well, one of the things we often tend to do is when we look at someone who's running a successful chain of restaurants, we assume that the journey has been a linear journey, that you somehow started on day one and you said, okay, I'm going to go from $1 to $1 million, and it's just all uphill. Is that the case, Dan, or is that what our entrepreneurs should expect as they launch their own entrepreneurial journeys?
So I hope for some of you it's just a straight, it's like a rocket ship, success, higher valuations, and everything goes the way you want it to. My journey hasn't been that way. So, starting your own business is awesome. Finally, no bosses, all these visions, and then I did what an entrepreneur should do. You cut costs, and Susie, my wife, and I moved into her mom's basement. And I said, look, 6 months, 12 months max. We had one little baby at the time. We're going to get this business off the ground. So 3 years later, I'm still in my mother-in-law's basement. We haven't hit any projections of what we started to do. And then we started to have some success, and we opened our first restaurant, and I moved out of my mother-in-law's basement, signed a mortgage, bought a small house, got into the house. At that point, we'd added another dog, another kid, now more overhead, and then our first restaurant started to fail. And if you want to wake up with a stomach ache and feel awful, try a big mortgage, 2 little kids, a wife who trusts and believes in you, and a failing business with no safety net, no way out, a 10-year lease, a banker with his hand around your throat. That feeling, I would wake up with 3 seconds in the morning, open my eyes and think oh, it's a new day. Maybe 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and then the weight of that cloud. So my partner, Mike, and I, who I love dearly, and partnership's a huge part of my life, we lost $1 million we didn't have. We had to pay it all back. I thought we were going to file personal bankruptcy. I thought we might lose the house. My wife, thankfully, just stuck with me the whole way, and we dug our way out of that. But that, and then we've had other challenges, since then, and digging out of that hole was really difficult. But no, if you look at now, 7 restaurants and 1,500 employees, and that's why I appreciate that it may look like a success, but it's born out of failure, and the fear of that next failure is a big part of what drives the intensity and the commitment to, you can't take anything for granted.
So what sustains you? How do you keep the faith when you have the situation that you just described, that no, I will in fact get there?
Because while losing sucks, winning is so good. And so the way we win in our company, for me, is like, my partner Mike, he feels a win. The staff wins. People get promoted. We have people who started at, $2 an hour and are now making 6 figures and have built their careers. We have people who are, their first generation to be in America, and they can build a life. And so I see people, proposing to their spouse, their future spouse in the restaurant, and celebrating things, and coming to the restaurant after a cancer treatment. And so the wins, like taking care of the people, building careers, guests enjoying the hospitality, that's enough to get me out of bed every day. And you take your kicks in the teeth and you say, like, all right, if that's the cover charge to the party, I'm in.
Well, I can share with you that when I first received the offer from GW to come and be a professor here, my son, who used to live there, we celebrated at Founding Farmers. So we have very strong memories of that restaurant as well. You mentioned Mike, and that's your partner, Michael Vukurovich. I apologize. You founded your own firm with him, Vukurovich Simons Advisory Group, in 2004. Can you comment on how you came together as a team and how important that was to you?
So Mike was one of my first bosses. He hired me when I was 23 years old, and he was an executive at the company. And so for several years, he was a boss and a mentor. Not so much a close friend per se, but he really embraced my approach to kind of life and career, which was, I was taught by my dad, everybody's equal. All people are equal. You're never better than anybody, and you're never worse than anybody. And my dad said, don't look up at anybody, look across the table. Because as soon as you look up at someone, they have to look down at you, and don't create that dynamic. You can admire things that people accomplish, but you don't know enough about someone entirely to put them on some pedestal above you. And why should you have somebody looking down at you? So I took that philosophy with me, and Mike Vukurovich embraced it. And even though he was this, he's 15 years older than me and better and has all this experience and knowledge, but he was an incredible mentor. And eventually because as a great boss, you can't fear your people. You can't worry about developing someone and letting them become better than you. That's really what you should be going for as a boss or a mentor. So we worked together for years, and then we worked apart for a bit. And then I called him and said, hey, what are you going to do next? And he said, I'm going to start my own thing. And I said, let's do it together. And that, it was that 2003. So we decided to start the company together. So it really went from boss to mentor to friend to business partner. And it's just been a wonderful journey.
Okay. That's a great lesson. What advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs who want to develop that kind of a mentorship, who want to find their own Mike Vukurovich?
So I think the first thing is you got to know yourself. You really need to know what your strengths are, what your passions are, and you need to know what you don't have. For Mike and I, it was clear to me from the beginning of that relationship that he had a lot I didn't have, but I believed that I had something he didn't have. And I never looked to just take anything from him. I think as you're developing these kind of relationships, you want to look for what you can give. How do you help? How do you contribute to that person? So I'm not a fan of go find a mentor. I'm a fan of go build awesome relationships. Contribute to somebody else. Help somebody else succeed and win. Make it about your team or the people around you. And I think what inevitably comes out of that are a bunch of different awesome relationships. Partners, mentors, friends, mentees, wingman, wingwoman. But I think it stems from that genuine, how do I contribute to somebody else?
Great. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk more about some of the guiding principles that you use in your professional life and as you run your businesses. Let's start with decision making, something that obviously every business owner and every leader has to do. What are some of your guiding principles for decision making? For instance, as you decide when and where to open a new restaurant, you have a new one, you said, in King of Prussia, or how you set the menu or the pricing, or equally importantly, how do you maintain that consistency of quality across all your restaurants?
I do think when it comes to decision making that we all benefit from a framework and having our feet on the ground. There's just too much in business that can throw you off. There's greed, there's bad decisions of others, there's pressure and what feels like no-win situations. So I can see how people end up making decisions they regret. I have a phrase that I live by, which is a life with no regrets. And the way that I end up trying to deliver on a life with no regrets is to have foresight and to understand the impact of my decisions. And like, if I do this, then what? Where do we be? Am I happy with that? Okay, rewind. And so giving myself almost my own little case studies to envision where things might go. When we started the restaurant company, we came up with a phrase, through the eyes of the farmer. And that became the grounding principle through which we make all of our decisions. So Mike and I's business partners are a large group of American family farmers, mostly in North Dakota. And as I got to know them over the years, a lot of the positive stereotypes are true. They care about their community. They think super long-term, multi-generationally. They're not swayed by today's pressure, and they don't make, bullshit excuses about the weather. They just take whatever comes. So we try to pull all of our decisions through the eyes of the farmer and make really grounded, long-term decisions. And, a farmer doesn't exit the business or do things dramatically differently because prices are down or prices are up. So for me, it's about being principally centered. And I can't tell anybody what your principles are. You need to know. And if you know and you're clear when you're really tested, and make no mistake about it, as entrepreneurs, I promise you, you will be tested. You will find yourselves in situations where it is much easier to do the easy or comfortable thing than to do the right thing. You will be in situations where you'll make a lot more money if you do the easy thing. But if you want to do the right thing, you got to know going into the situation the principles that your feet are anchored in.
So speaking of principles, one of the things we really appreciate, Dan, thank you, is that you have interacted extensively with our students in a variety of contexts. And when you do, one of the books that you always recommend is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And just to remind our audience, the 7 habits listed by Covey are: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and sharpen the saw. Of those, what to you are the most important habits and why?
I'm a huge Covey fan. I ask all my students to read the book. I ask my employees and my team to read his book, 7 Habits. So I can't choose one because it's really a recipe, and it's the way that those 7 habits go together. But since you're asking me to choose one, I can highlight one. Not that it's my favorite, but it's clear, let's just say what has served me well, and what I strive to do is seek first to understand before seeking to be understood. And if you ask me what the most important skill in business is, I think it's listening. And listening more than just with your ears, but the ability to be plugged into other people's senses and know what's going on around you and understand how other people are feeling, and always ask why. Being quick to shoot, thinking you know all the right answers. If I've learned one thing in the last 30 years, it's that I'm wrong a lot, and the only way I get to right is by gathering the information from everybody around me. So I think seeking first to understand is key. And then, look, I like leadership, and that means I like being in charge sometimes. And so I like, seeking to be understood. Okay, it's my turn now. But I would never just go out and deliver direction without gathering and trying to understand feedback from the people around me who often know better or know more or just see it differently. but I love those Covey guiding habits.
Okay. So since 2012, for many semesters, you've taught a course at GW to our undergraduate students, Business World, Practical Insights, Applications, and Vital Skills. And in that course, one of the things that you always emphasize is culture, the importance of company culture. Can you talk a little bit about what you think it takes and how you've gone about building a strong culture in your own organization?
Sure. But first I want to tell you what I wanted to call that course was all the stuff that you need to know that they're never going to teach you in college. But then I realized that might seem a bit of an indictment of college, and I realize I'm here to, be a force for positive change. So I was motivated to do the workshop because so much of a career, whether it's entrepreneurship, and really I think it's all entrepreneurship, because if you're going to be working for somebody else, you got to own you, and you're the package, the brand, the voice, the message. You're your number one customer. So you always have to be growing and evolving and doing the tough stuff if you want to win. And so it doesn't necessarily, I think it's false to say that entrepreneurship is something that occurs when you own your own business. I think it's really out there. So when I think about how I apply culture, I wanted the workshop to build these, combat skills, loving skills, looking in the mirror skills. I see a lot of big companies out there with culture initiatives, and then you'll walk into their hotel or their boardroom and you see a poster up on the wall about how they're going to treat their people or how they're going to, keep the hotel room so clean. But then the hotel room's not clean, and you walk by someone in the hallway and their eyes are down and they're not psyched to be at work. So culture's not about writing down your core values and putting them on a poster and doing a big corporate rollout. This is why I like being a small company guy. Culture is about knowing what you want to accomplish, doing it in a way that attracts other like-minded people, and then making sure everybody learns and grows, and that while you can deliver on the company goals, they attach to people's personal and life goals. So that for me is really that's the seed. And then you can build whatever culture you want to do, because culture doesn't really exist. Companies don't sort of exist on their own. Companies are just bringing together a whole bunch of people. Culture is then just how these people feel, treat each other, the traditions and the languages and the habits and the vibes that are formed. So I try to emphasize that you have to all be attached and be getting value and feel like you're growing and blooming, and then you're on board. It's not just the company mission, it's your mission. So that's my maybe slightly odd approach to culture.
Interesting. So you talked about companies being a collection of people. So I assume that this is something you use as a guiding principle when you hire. Do you judge people on whether they're going to be a fit with your company culture when you're looking to hire someone in your restaurants?
We do. So there's sort of, intelligence tests, personality tests. We're looking for that. We're not like, I don't even know the names of the dating apps. Bumble, Tinder. I know there's, whatever I'm trying to say here, but it's not just about finding a match for some short moment. It's about saying, hey, this is us. This is what the company's like. This is what all the people here are like. Do you like this vibe? What's your real vibe? And so when we go through the interview process, I'm not looking for someone to sell me on what they think I want to hear to get hired, because it's a total waste of time to get a job at a company that you're not a good match for. A total waste of time. I don't want to see anybody do that. I would like companies to be more open and say, this is really what works here. And so that's what we strive to do. And I try to deliver for our team a really high level of accountability, an intense level of accountability, with like a really soft, squishy, a lot of love and a lot of caring and a lot of listening and a lot of understanding. Now, that's not for everybody. Some people don't want to, what we say is we manage in the gray, and every situation is unique and every person is unique. And yes, we have recipes and procedures and protocols and expectations and procedures, but then life happens and you have to be willing to judge and collaborate with people in what's right for them and unique to a situation. When I tell people that, some people are thinking, that's weird. You know, I'm best with rules and exact predictability and no gray area. Black or white, right is right, wrong is wrong. That's it. There's nothing in the middle. And I'm thinking, awesome, I'm glad you told me that. Don't come work for us. Your head will pop off here, because I'm like, oh, tell me more. And for some people that works for it, that's a good culture match. That's who I want to hire.
Okay. So one other thing that you emphasize consistently, and I hope you don't mind my sharing this story, when we were exchanging emails with Dan, sort of coordinating today's session, the last email I got from him said, I will be there at 11:36. So, and this is a preamble to say one of the things you clearly, truly value and emphasize is time management. How do you go about managing time in your own professional life?
So when I say a life with no regrets, I really mean it. And there's 168 hours in a week. That's 10,080 minutes. And that's what we all have. It's the great equalizer. I just want to know what I'm going to do with mine. And I take it really seriously, and I try to role model that and teach that. And by the time I get to the end of 168 hours, I feel really confident that I've put 56 of them towards sleep and X of them towards this and Y of them towards that. And I know what my big rocks are and my medium rocks and my little rocks, and I know what all the other, kind of bullshit time wasters are. Excuse me. I lost my bet. And so I think the first step with time management, it's not about jamming more stuff into life. It's about choosing what are your highest value things. Like, I want to have it all. But it's not everything. It's all with a capital A. It's the stuff that I've decided that's most important, the roles in my life. For me, it's being a dad, being a husband, being a son to my mom, being a brother to my sisters and my bro, and being a boss. So, okay, I have 10,080 minutes this week, and then there's 52 blocks of those. And, I could die like right now, and then it's just over. I mean, that'd be like distressful for you, distressing. But
we have another 4 minutes.
I'll try not to die till the end. But I don't know, a life with no regrets. I just would say, don't put time into things that don't have value for you. But the only way you can do that is to know what's important to you first, right? So for me, I like to write it down, understand my big rocks and my medium rocks, allocate my time towards the stuff that's important. And to do that, you have to have the courage to edit, cut out the stuff that's not valuable. That friend from high school that's not really a friend, it just hangs on and annoys you. It's like, you know what? I'm done there. That's not to any of my friends from high school. So I think through like ranking and editing and putting on your own oxygen mask first and taking care of yourself before helping those around you, it's not selfish to know what's best for you and what you want to accomplish and then doing that. So I built a whole curriculum around it, and I try to teach it in a manageable way. But I hate the time management stuff that is about fitting in more or doing more. If you love like watching cat videos on Insta, awesome. Plan for it, do it. Know it recharges your batteries and you love it. Don't do it for less time than you want, and don't do it for more time than is valuable. Just know what is valuable to you, and that's the way to allocate your time.
That's great advice. And by the way, some of you might enjoy reading a book that a Harvard Business School professor has written called How Will You Measure Your Life, which was an interesting book on the same theme. Do you really allocate time to the things that you value the most? So I'm going to end with a question on something about doing good in the world. You founded something called Our Last Straw, which is about eliminating the use of plastic straws. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about, why it's a passion for you, and what the people watching today can do to help?
This was a topic where I felt like I could go outside the four walls of our restaurant and make a bigger impact than just what we do. So in just the last 12 months, if I were in my restaurants, just my 3 in DC, if I were giving out plastic straws, probably would have given out over 1 million plastic straws just in my 3 restaurants if we were just giving straws out with water and doing that. Well, we're not. But I realized that I don't need some 9-year-old to do research to tell America that 500 million straws get done a day. I see it. I'm glad that kid did that. And I'm sad about the turtle in the video, but I'm glad it happened because that helped get the word out there. But I just look at this plastic disaster, and about 15 years ago, I saw a photo of that great garbage patch in the ocean, and I'm thinking, this is awful. And that's about when I started having kids, and I thought, I'm not going to set myself up for my kids are going to look at me one day and say, like, what the were you doing? How did you let this happen? Like, your generation is awful. You have ruined the world. So for me, the plastic pollution is crystal clear. It's a huge problem, and we are doing something about it. So Our Last Straw is a business-led coalition. We've got hundreds of other restaurants and businesses to join us, give up plastic straws. It's just the beginning. Soon it'll be Our Last Plastic Fork, and then it'll be Our Last Plastic To-Go container and Our Last Plastic whatever. So we have a long-term vision for the nonprofit. But I wanted it to be a business-led coalition. I don't think that it should always be about NGOs feeling like they're swimming upstream. I wanted to show that conscious capitalists can make a difference. And restaurants can thrive and be profitable, and you can run a really great business. You don't need all that plastic and all that waste. And so far the coalition's been really successful. Laws passed in DC, enforcement. Now we're working on Maryland. We have a chapter of Our Last Straw opening in Boston. So we hope to grow it both on straws geographically and on other plastic items. And folks can go to ourlaststraw.org. And just as an individual, you can take the pledge, which we just say is like #StopSucking, which is not a swear because I'm just like saying stop sucking. And then businesses can join, and that's how you can be part of the whole movement.
Well, that's a wonderful message to end our conversation on. I know what I, for one, will always remember the phrase, a life with no regrets. So thank you so much, Dan, today for taking the time to be here and sharing your thoughts and your ideas. Can we give Dan a great big round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you also to all of you who are here in the audience and joining us online. Please remember to join us again for the next session of George Talks Business. Our guest that day will be Dr. Donna Hoffman, Louis Rosenfeld Distinguished Scholar, Professor of Marketing, and co-director of the Center for the Connected Consumer here at GWSB. And she's going to talk about something that we all, I bet, are going to be influenced by at some point in our lives, the Internet of Things. That's when every device in our house is connected to the internet in some way. Just as a reminder, though, that talk is on February 25th, 2 weeks from now at noon, because next week, Monday, is President's Day, and we'll be observing President's Day. There will be no George Talks Business session. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you at the next session.